What's up guys, it's Austin Black again, and what I'm gonna do today is just like other YouTubers have been doing. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna spend the whole video talking about the A7S Mark III. But specifically as an FX9 owner, do I regret buying this camera? If I could go back, would I have just waited 8 more months and ordered a Sony A7S Mark III? Perhaps 2. I could have at least ordered 2 with less money than it cost for just the FX9. The short answer to that is no, I really do like the FX9. I want to kind of compare the two cameras and where they're situated as somebody who has shot Sony my whole career, from the A6500 to the A7 III to the FX9. I really enjoy these cameras, and I'm also really excited about what the A7S Mark III has to offer. So let's just get started with the bodies of these two cameras. That's going to be the biggest thing that's going to be a little bit different. It's really obvious. I think it's a little drawn out to just be like, oh, the FX9 has all the ports and the XLR and all this and that, professional, blah, blah, blah. The big thing with the body itself that's going to be different, in my opinion, is the variable ND filter. This is something that is a huge game changer for me. It allows me to dial in my settings very quickly. The FX9 is a great package that you can just grab and take with you. It's everything you need. You're not going to need tons of accessories to make this thing work. It is just a camera that can really do just about anything and serve just about any purpose. But there is a sacrifice with the variable ND. As it stands, it's not possible to have image stabilization on the sensor along with a variable ND filter. So that is actually a trade-off with the FX9. But it's also something I think that adds to the fact that the A7S Mark III is going to be the perfect companion camera for the FX9. Another fun feature is the zoom rocker that works with the power zoom on lenses like the 28 to 135.
Reporting live from Fort Worth, my name is Kristen Black, and this morning something really morbid happened here in this park where we're shooting a video.
So now that we got that out of the way, obviously these two cameras have different bodies, but let's talk about the image in particular. I think a lot of people were surprised about the features that made it into the A7S Mark III, such as the 4K 120, something that the FX9 does not do, as well as the 16-bit raw output over HDMI. That's something that the FX9 included, and it was a bit of a surprising inclusion on the A7S Mark III. So these cameras shoot different codecs, which is something that I think is interesting. The FX9 shoots XAVC-I, and the A7S Mark III shoots XAVC-SI. So it's really up in the air what the S actually means. What I think is just it's a newer codec that allows for 4K 120 and features like that. The FX9 currently doesn't support 4K 120, although it could be added in a future firmware update. As it stands, the A7S Mark III has a lot more recording modes that you can do in full frame. Right now, before the firmware release in October, the FX9 can only shoot 4K 60 in a Super 35 crop mode. So when you just look at these recording options, the A7S Mark III has more options in full frame. It has 4K 120 and a newer codec. The bit rates are very similar between the two, but on paper, it's actually looking like the A7S Mark III is a superior camera in terms of the different formats you can record. So a lot of us filmmakers got a chance to test out the A7S III footage with the James Matthews clips in S-Log3, and looking at them and grading them, they look fantastic. They look pretty similar to the files that come out of the FX9. Also, if you're wondering how I'm grading all of this, check out the Joel Famularo Phantom LUTs. He's making new ones for the FX9, and I'm sure he'll have some with the A7S Mark III as well. You can use promo code Austin, you can get a little discount. These are just the LUTs that I really enjoy using with my FX9 footage, and I think they look great with this A7S Mark III as well. So then we get on to a few nuts and bolts type features of autofocus and low light. Both of these cameras are going to perform about the same with excellent autofocus. The low light is definitely going to go to the A7S Mark III, and something very interesting that I saw in a video by Gerald Undone is that he may have discovered a dual gain switch at 16,000 ISO on the A7S Mark III. When you go from 12,800 to 16,000, there is a significant drop in noise, so that kind of is consistent with having that dual gain switch, which is interesting that they wouldn't market that feature if it is indeed a dual gain. Both of these cameras have 10-bit color. You're probably going to get the best image shooting S-Log3 with the most dynamic range. The FX9 does have the S-Cinetone color profile, whereas the A7S Mark III has more of the alpha picture profile type system. You have to keep in mind when you're comparing these two cameras is they're made by different branches of Sony. Sony Cine and Sony Alpha are two separate divisions. So basically, with all the information we've presented so far, it's looking like the A7S Mark III might actually be a better camera than the $11,000 FX9. So that begs the question, Austin, do you regret spending $11,000 on the FX9? And to really answer that, I'm going to have to get into a little bit more nuance and user experience type stuff. The first thing that I do have to mention is that the FX9 is a 6K sensor and you're downsampling that into 4K. So with a similar codec, you could expect a better image out of the FX9 than the A7S Mark III. So another important thing to consider with this camera is where it's positioned in Sony's lineup. This camera didn't replace the Sony FS7. This camera sits a tier above the FS7. And the way I like to think about this camera is it's like a full frame FS7 with an FS7 built inside, because when you use the Super 35 crop mode, you're still getting more effective resolution than the FS7 had. So that is one thing that both the FX9 and the A7 III have that the A7S Mark III isn't going to have, is that oversampled Super 35 mode where you can punch in and still maintain a 4K resolution. And another thing that really plays into this is kind of an X factor that you have with certain cameras when you're comparing them. The FX9 really has that X factor of excellent highlight roll-off, excellent skin tones. It looks like a very professional picture. Now, I haven't used the A7S Mark III, but I would expect it to be a little bit more comparable to mirrorless cameras where it's a little bit punchier, a little bit more digital looking, whereas the FX9 has what you can only really describe as the X factor when it comes to certain cinema cameras. Playing off that kind of X factor, something that really doesn't get communicated in all of the specs is the ability to overexpose or underexpose your image and bring back usable information in your image. So far, I've found that the FX9 is the best camera that I've used in terms of this. I can't say that I've used that many high-end cameras, but the FX9 is definitely far and away the best, and I really expect it to outperform the Sony A7S Mark III pretty significantly when it comes to that. So essentially what I'm saying is, for my workflow, I love having the FX9 a fully functional, fully fledged documentary / commercial camera that I can show up with on a shoot, and it can do everything and check all of the boxes that a lot of companies are looking for when it comes to the camera you're using. And then the A7S Mark III can fit in as a perfect B camera, a perfect companion to this camera. It can fill in some of the gaps that the FX9 can't currently do, like 4K 120 and excellent low light performance. The A7S Mark III is also going to be great to use on a gimbal, whereas, you know, I'm unsure about the ability to use the FX9 on a gimbal without a giant rig and a big team of people helping you operate it. So basically what it boils down to is the FX9 is a camera built for professionals where you're on a set that requires XLR inputs, 8 channels of audio, SDI outputs, that kind of thing. Essentially an all-in-one production workhorse. And if you're not looking for something like that, if you're shooting primarily events and you're not on jobs where you need that kind of thing, I think the FX9 is a camera that you could probably skip and go with the A7S Mark III. But for me, I still like the FX9. I really love the ability to have a camera that can shoot this documentary type format. I really can't overstate how important that variable ND and the dual gain switch and the ergonomics of this camera are to that type of workflow. But overall, I am so excited for the A7S Mark III. This is the camera that I have been waiting like 5 years for, just like all of you. I know everyone is so excited about this camera. I have mine pre-ordered. I tried to get it in early, so hopefully I can get a review out for you guys in a timely manner. But that's it for this one. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.